There's a lot of therapy in green building, right?
Exactly. What a great statement that is. You're absolutely
I don't
right.
know if we should kick it off with that or not, but no shame. No shame.
All
So,
right.
I just finished just over a decade at Integrated Eco Strategy. It was an amazing experience, work that I'm very grateful to have had the opportunity to do, and in a team that I really enjoyed working with. But upon reflection, there were two catalysts. One was we finished this major project at Harvard University. It was a very intensive effort on our part to research thousands of products for this high-tech laboratory building that is now in Allston, Mass. It's 577,000 square feet. So when that project came to an end, I also found myself sort of with this time space to reflect on the work that had just been done and what that meant to me and where I was going. It's a good habit to give ourselves permission to pause and consider why we're doing what we do, because I use this example a lot. When we do research on product chemistry, that is really, it can be very intensive work. And I'm not a chemist, I'm not a trained chemist, and most project teams don't have chemists who became architects or engineers. So we're having conversations with technical experts at manufacturers, asking them for information on their products. And sometimes it's very cut and dry. It's a very simple product. It has very few ingredients. I guess the point I was making before I lost my train of thought was, I love when I can help people understand that by taking the little bit of extra time to ask for transparency, whether it's for
Right.
chemistry or embodied carbon or other attributes, you are making space in your day job to be impactful beyond the project you're working on. Don't you feel like we're more networked too, Jody? I mean, if I want to know about embodied carbon now,
Yeah.
I can go on one of my social media feeds and figure out who's working on that. And I might not even know those people, but I can be connected to them probably within an hour.
Yeah, which is
And
phenomenal. And in fact, the work you've done on materials and now more on carbon. I've talked to you more on carbon in the last 6 months.
yeah,
This is something I'm wondering if other people experience it. I'm not sure if I experience it. But after there's a really big project where you've had impact and you've had collaboration and there's a goal. Do you are you jonesing for the next project that has that passion in it?
the big projects have such impact, right? When Harvard decides to procure things without flame retardants or PFAS stain treatments for furniture, the market shifts, right? The distributors for fabric manufacturers or those who make roller shades are all paying attention. And I think part of the dip after the big project is that sometimes you can revisit those same products for the next project, and they haven't they haven't embedded that change yet. It's still a special order, or all of a sudden your project isn't big enough again. And that's kind of disheartening, right? To go through all that work to affect change, to have an enthusiastic partner on the side of the manufacturer, or at least some subset within the manufacturer, and then to not be able to find that for the next project. Because that's the idea behind this work, right? Is that we build on the shoulders and the work of those who come before us. And it is working. It certainly is working.
It's not only about a pause to kind of re-engage you and understand where you're going and take the next steps. It's also a pause to allow yourself to be joyful over the progress you've made. I think that too often, and I really have gone through this a lot lately. I'm just so frustrated that it's not moving fast enough.
Yes.
I forget how much has been accomplished. And so I really appreciate even the little reflection on the last 10 years in the job industry gives me a realization that there has been an impact. And I think that passionate people who want to make change often forget to fuel our batteries by looking back and saying, whoa, that's a lot
Yeah.
of stuff.
That's so surprising to me, Jody, because you're normally the first person that's advocating for celebration.
Right. Just nobody, like, I'm not in a world that celebrates stuff. And so I'm the one who's, it's like one of the things, I'm the one who's always saying, let's celebrate. And everyone's like, yeah. And I'm not saying that about you guys. You are the good part of the world, but the world of the day-to-day job is not necessarily that way.
And this is why I think networks like Carbon Leadership Forum, networks like NESI, or even, Architecture 2030, the role they have in aggregating stories, case studies, officially they're called, but I like to call them stories, right? They're connecting the wider world with success, right? What does success look like? What we have to remember all the time is that these products are manufactured somewhere. And if they have chemicals of concern in them, then they also have the potential to do harm, not just in those fence line communities, but to manufacturers, contractors who are working with the products, as well as, building occupants in the end of life. So we've been so focused for so long on building occupants that I think, we check the boxes for those products and those emissions that we're always concerned about inside the building, without realizing that hexavalent chromium, Chrome 6, that creates our shiny faucets or shiny table legs, is so very toxic when it's released in the environment, which it's not intentionally released, right? We don't allow for that. But, if it gets out into the environment, the story of Erin Brockovich, and also to those manufacturers. So the reason why we ask for trivalent chromium or milled finishes instead of the shining chrome is to address what's going on outside of the building. And again, we have such power if collectively we decide that that's important, because if everybody starts specifying trivalent chromium, manufacturers are going to just do it. And many already have. There's also a lot of room on the project scale, as well as on the individual practitioner scale, to ask, to convey the message, and to make a difference in that process.
I always say to people, green procurement is part of New York State government work. There's a whole bunch of stuff going on, all different levels. And people are like, well, we're not going to ask for that because we know it's not available. I'm like, ask for that so it becomes available.
Yes.
That's the key, right? That's every single time you ask a question, you've opened someone's brain enough so that next time the question is asked, they might be receptive to it. They might be ready to deal with it. Erin Brockovich, I just looked up, the movie was from 2000 and 2021. And finally, hexavalent chromium is really, it's been addressed for a little while, but it's something we can talk about on this podcast. We wouldn't have been able to talk about it on this podcast in any context except for that movie 21 years ago.
Right. So yesterday I spent almost 5 hours sitting in a hearing for the Mass Legislature, waiting to testify for one of our 5 PFAS bills, eliminating PFAS in consumer products and in the building sector. That would be carpet treatments, upholstery, and furniture. But before that, there were bills on air quality and trying again to refocus on the environmental injustice of degraded air, as it tends to disproportionately impact communities of color and who are poorer, right? And so the Clean Air Act was passed in the 70s, right? Or the subject of another bill, lead, okay? Lead was one of the first things that the federal government actually banned under the Toxic Substances Control Act, TSCA, right? But we're talking way too long, and we still have a lead problem. We still have a housing problem in Massachusetts. There were a couple of people who testified yesterday very eloquently about the impact of having lead still in buildings on people being able to find affordable housing if they have children, or the young married couples who are probably going to get pregnant. They don't get called back for rentals. Landlords know that they probably still have lead in their buildings. They haven't de-leaded the buildings. We need to take the precautionary principle. There may be places, a seat in a valve or a ball in a valve, a control valve, a valve that is maybe not even handling water, it's handling gases and other substances. And it might be that PFAS or PTFE, the PFAS family, is the best solution because it reduces coefficient friction, increases energy efficiency, and it doesn't break down over time, which could lead to degradation of the whole system, et cetera, and failure, right? So that might be okay, but dental floss, mascara, stain treatments, the discovery I had in reading the Green Science Policy Institute's great report, PFAS in the built environment, PFAS in building products, was released May 13th.
Regarding that valve discussion, isn't there still a concern about where that valve would be produced, even if it's I think
the bigger challenge, Jody, is, for instance, I discovered through that report, roofing, used for solar reflectance, used to improve durability. It's used in roofing material that has previously passed the red list because it was EPDM instead of PVC, right? We're trying to get away from PVC. And by the way, what this report does, which is kind of unsettling, is they say, we don't know what the best alternates are. Where do we start? Because if you just read that report as a practitioner, you're going to be scared out of your wits. You're going to want to stick your head in the sand, and you don't want to know, right? Because when we know, that's when we're sort of implicated as, okay, now you know, so how could you possibly keep specifying stain treatments if you know how readily available they are to building occupants via dust, right?
Right. And if there's no viable alternative that somebody else has said this is the viable alternative, then you're responsible as a professional to represent that. And how can you represent that risk factor and still get building built?
Right. And when you're an architect and you're creating your contract documents, you're on the hook for design, meeting design intent, performance. And so the challenge in the materials world is, for instance, in a lab environment, epoxy flooring is the standard, right? That is widely used. And well, epoxy flooring has a whole host of bisphenols in it. So the challenge then becomes, would we use a flooring that is less resilient, less durable, and potentially it becomes so damaged that it's not anti-slip, or it can't be cleaned easily, and then it has to be ripped out. Then we have an embodied carbon issue. There are 180 pieces of legislation in the United States dealing with PFAS in this current year. And that may result in 180 different, or even some fraction thereof, different approaches. But what it does do is it sends that strong signal that there's a problem with PFAS. You better believe that the roofing people whose the water drains off the roof into stormwater, into groundwater, gets into potentially our drinking water. You better believe that they're being concerned. Even though this is just a small subset of what's in our built environment, by passing it and codifying a PFAS as toxic chemical, we're concerned, we want you to prove that it's not in your product. The good news is that in certain specification divisions, interiors, your finishes, your paints and your carpets and your acoustical ceiling tiles, there are three. There are actually
Right.
7, 10, right? So there are options there. And again, that's because, the leaders in this space did manage to push and get to a place where many manufacturers decided it would be in their best interest. And indoor environmental quality is directly tied to it.
And Lauren can speak to that as an interior designer, especially. I think there's a lot of, have you seen an increase in access to that information? I mean, mindful materials is one avenue to explore, but also Red List.
Absolutely. There's been a huge increase in, easily, retrievable information at this point, comparative to, what was maybe there 5-10 years ago.
Yeah.
We have a super long way to go. Just even hearing you talk about even the things that I've never even considered, it's like, oh my gosh, there's a lot to look at here.
Test what happens when you have different levels of indoor air contaminants and how there's a measurable impact on cognitive functioning. And they've, that research is borne out in public schools where they've kept data on test scores, and they can see, again, during the hearings yesterday, kids that are in schools, not green schools, that are in poor communities where they don't have air conditioning, they're sitting in a room where it might hit 90 some odd degrees on a hot day, and they're taking their tests.
Yeah, very high
CO2. You bet they're not going to do well. My issue with LEED, and in this moment where we really, really need to accelerate change, is that it still allows people to do the lowest common denominator, which might not be good for embodied carbon, might not be good for human health, and that's discouraging. That it still is a pathway. And I know it gets, the bottom comes up with every new issue, but then just like the lead laws and implementing them and having change, it takes a long time for that to cycle through. When I present and people are like, I don't have the time, I don't have the budget, I don't have the staff, I'm like, you have the potential on one product to do it differently.
Yeah, pick one product.
Pick one product, use it on every project, or it's a high volume. Make a difference in that space.
Fantastic approach, because it is much, I think it's too easy in this world. It's not just a design thing. It's too easy in this world to say, I'm overwhelmed, therefore I'm not going to engage in at all. And what we should say is, I'm overwhelmed, I'm going to pick the one thing that I know I can do.
Right.
Right? Because then that just means that the next project, I think you can relate most of the problems that we're seeing in the building industry to problems that we see as human individuals in our own lives. When I make a change, once I get comfortable with that change, it reveals something else to me that can be done. And there are times when I've said, no, you know what? I see that can be done, but I'm not going to do that thing.
That's a rabbit hole. I'm not going down that rabbit hole.
But quite often there are several options that are revealed, and I'm able to take one more step that can't be overwhelming. And I don't think everyone can be a champion 100% of the time. I think we're entering into a time and place where more people will have to step up to that. But I think that more people will get there if we, if we celebrate the individual steps they can take, and the one product they can make an impact on, and the one question they can ask. Never be afraid to ask that question and say, can I get a product that won't kill me?
We have to point out that these become legacy issues. PFAS never goes away, right? So the whole family shares some very basic attributes that make them forever chemicals,
Right.
and make them similar enough that the ones that have been studied, PFOA and PFAS,
Yeah.
that the likelihood that all of their cousins are similarly saddled with bad health outcome, bad health impacts and everything else is really high. And this is where, we have to ask ourselves, how can we start winnowing down where PFAS is used? The great thing is companies like Keen took out that huge ad in the New York Times about PFAS, challenging other clothing manufacturers to do the same thing, to do the research, figure out what the substitutions are that aren't regrettable, and just make it happen. And Nike is right on the heels, and the only thing I've heard through the grapevine is that they still haven't figured out how to eliminate the PFAS in the waffle iron, like whatever it is that they still use to make the rubber
Right.
soles, right? Because when you take that anti-sticking agent away,
Yeah.
you ruin a lot of rubber.
Okay, so we're at about an hour.
Are you kidding me?
No.
Yeah.
Oh my God.
No, I know.
So sorry.
I think what we're talking about in a nutshell is that, like food, the products that we have around us in our spaces and that make our buildings have ingredients. And at least in this country, we don't have standards for healthy ingredients. So we have tens of thousands of chemicals that can be added to mixtures or added to create solids that really we're relying on manufacturers, and they are relying on their supply chains to know if they're okay. And we don't, because we don't require testing of these chemicals before they come to market. So in a sense, we're all guinea pigs in this experiment of, does it work? Is it okay? That's what we're talking about today. We're talking about product chemistry, the opportunities for individuals to engage in the ask of manufacturers or stores that supply us with products. And that ask is, what's in my product? Because I'm worried that all products break down into dust, and that dust will contain chemicals from that product. And maybe they'll be benign and they don't have any known health effects. Maybe they're not benign and they have known health effects. What's in your product, and if there is a chemical of concern, can that be removed and can we make it better? And then, because of the need, the urgency to address the climate crisis, while we're asking about product chemistry, we're also trying to figure out how much carbon is attributed to the creation of our product as well. So we've added this additional layer.
Now, with all of that said, are you excited or are you depressed?
Oh gosh, depends on the hour of the day and the day of the week and the month and where I am. No, I think I'm optimistic. By pushing for transparency, we now have thousands of labels. And we also have mindful materials and other repositories. There are lots of resources. If you type in healthy building materials, you'll come up with a whole long list of them.
Is it safe to assume that Lisa might have answered one of our two questions by what is the biggest initiative and thing you wish people knew more about right now?
Yeah, that we
Whole
don't
talk it, or is there another one?
No, it really is that we don't regulate chemicals. I was just looking, a neighbor of mine was spraying, you know, Roundup on their lawn.
Yeah.
And again, you know, they say, well, but see, it says within 24 hours of rain or after, you know, 72 hours that it's safe for pets and children. And I said, but that's within a controlled box. It's like your shampoo that says, if you've ever read some shampoos closely, they'll say, turn off the hot water.
Yeah.
When you're lathering. They're not saying that because it's great if you lather with cold water, although it might be better for your hair. They're saying that because when you add hot water, that heat, you can have chemicals react.
Okay, so who should we all be following? Who's the person that you follow? Who's your hero? Who's the person that we should all be looking to for guidance, because you already do?
I guess I'd have to go to Arlene Blum at the Green Science Policy Institute. First of all, she is an amazing individual who went into the field of science at a time when women weren't invited into university PhD programs. She's climbed some of the highest mountains of the world and put together all women teams to do that. And then she's also dedicated her whole life to eliminating chemicals of concern. And that has been her passion. And she's always, you know, she's a scientist, so she's relied on science, and yet she's done an excellent job with the Green Science Policy Institute and her colleagues translating that science so it's easily digestible and actionable. And I think that is key for anyone who listens to this conversation and feels at a loss about what to do. They have steps for just general consumers of products, what to do and how to avoid the 6 classes of chemicals. So
Awesome.
That's awesome. Thank you so much, Lisa. I've learned a ton.
okay.
I'm going to advocate more.
People say, how do I do it? I say, just ask, what is in my product?
Yeah.
What is it made out of? You don't have to know what the right answer is. Just by virtue of asking that question, you are signaling.
This has been Subject to Change, a sustainability podcast.
So, all right, ladies, have a great night. Thank you. Nice to see you, meet the cats and everything else. Have a great evening.
You too.
Right.
Bye.
Yeah, take care. Bye-bye.